Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. If you can, please give me a thumbs up and and say hi at least. Hello, Dion. Hello, Yvonne. Can everybody hear me? As in the guest now. Okay. Good morning, everyone. We're just gonna kick off. I see we're sitting at 168 people and growing nicely. So, yeah, welcome to yet another installment of an iTuesday, whereby we'll be touching an interesting topic. It can never be a normal Tuesday without an iTuesday session. So please join in and say hi. And as we wait for more people, I'll quickly introduce myself. I'm Sipamandla Makubane, also known as Sipa. I'm the claims manager for the environmental liability claims, commercial crime, and all claims from outside of South Africa that is Africa related. And I see the numbers are growing nicely. And yeah, as we wait, please feel free to post your greeting and on the chat. And there's a twist though, there's a catch on this one, because we're celebrating an Africa month. Please do so by your native language and say hi in your native language and tell us where you're joining from. So I'll go first and I'll quickly say Sanbonani Nonke Namgelegile, which is good morning and welcome to everybody. Again, don't forget to mention where you're joining us from. Today we have a privilege of talking to Adrian Human, an operations manager at Dryzit Environmental. Dryzit is an independent incident response company which attends to the actual spillages by way of containment, cleanup, and rehabilitation. And if I miss something, Adrian, please add. And then we also have the privilege of talking to Philip Bettendach, who's an environmental specialist, also known to some of us as an incident manager from EFI Global. EFI Global is an independent firm that is part of Sedgwick being an international loss adjusting firm. Again, we'll be unpacking the environmental legislation and exposures across the African countries while tapping into some live actual claims examples relating to transport and the mining slash industrial incidences. I'll quickly go into the CVs. I know they're quite long, but I'll just briefly summarize them. Adrian has qualifications in computer-aided design, health, safety, and environment, hazmat awareness and operations. Again, I'm not doing justice to his CV and experience because it's quite long, similar as to Vili's as well. Vili has qualifications in fire technology, octal and asbestos training, operational health and safety, as well as risk assessment, and obviously environmental law. And again, that's a brief summary of their CVs. And obviously, with regards to today's topic, they have quite a lot of experience and relevant people to talk to. As we get into the business of today, the major takeaways in the recent iTuesdays that we've had in early this year, as well as the unconference, for me, that stood out from the likes of Vusi Thembekwayo, Daniel Sip, Precious Dube, and not so long ago, it was from Mushambi, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, Mushambi Mutuma. They all had the one message in their talks. It basically said, despite all the current challenges, economic challenges, as well as the tariffs that are being imposed to all the countries in typical Oprah Winfrey style, we as Africans, the future still looks bright for us, and we should do things for ourselves. We should trade even more amongst ourselves and each other as the African countries. This is obviously driven by the population as well as the resources, the natural resources that are available to us. And with that said, I think it's very relevant for us to basically go into the business of today in terms of the topic from environmental exposures and the liabilities as we obviously intra-trade as Africans. Before I hand over to Adrian, please feel free to post your questions, your comments, and on the chat, and then I'll attend to them at a later stage. And before I hand over to Adrian, I'll quickly share the presentation we prepared for you today. And again, please feel free to post any comments, questions on the chat, and we'll attend to them at a later stage. Please give me a few more minutes, and this will also allow people to join as well, as I see the numbers are growing quite nicely. Few minutes. Can you see my screen?
Not yet, Sipa.
No.
Okay. Not sharing, and then I'll reshare again. Just now. Nothing still.
We can't see anything, Sipa.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. Can you see something? Is it in a presentation format?
Yes.
Okay. And yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for the patience. And I'm hoping more people have joined. And again, with this presentation, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be touching on a couple of countries from an Africa perspective, from an environmental legislation point of view, as well as that is through Adrian from Adrisit, being the people on the ground when they respond to the incidences, and they're the best people to touch on the challenges that they've gone through, the clients that have experienced, and also we've got Vili from an incident management point of view. So with that said, over to you, Adrian. And welcome again. Thanks for your time for attending and facilitating this this talk from a legislation point of view.
Thank you, Sipa. Yeah, thank you for you and your team and for I2 for setting up this opportunity for us to talk about the environmental liabilities and obviously risk and compliance, and obviously joining be part of the Africa Month, as you already mentioned. Sure. Thank you for that. Yes. So yeah, so what we need to look at obviously is the we're starting off with the intra-Africa trade growth, the risk and the compliance. As you know, the African continental free trade area, that's the growth of that is the projected growth of 33% up till 2035. And obviously bringing a huge risk to the environment because of you're going to see there's going to be more vehicles, more trucks, more goods, and the potential of spillages that's going to happen. That's going to occur. So the African Continental Free Trade Area that unites 55 African Union member states, creating a single market for all goods and services. It's a goal to boost intra-Africa trade, driving economic growth, diversification, and job creation. Despite challenges like poor infrastructures and trade barriers, the African Continental Free Trade Area is projected to significantly increase trade and economical benefits. So we're gonna obviously our focus points will be in the cross-border Namibia, Botswana, Zambia, etc. So why environmental compliance that matters. Environmental liability in cross-border hazmat transport refers to the legal responsibility for environmental damages or harm caused by hazardous materials during the transportation across international borders. There's things that we need to look at as your obviously across border, your compliances, cross-border trucking, higher exposure to environmental liabilities, etc. on that. Oh goodness, sorry, I'm just going through my notes here. So if you go to the next slides.
From an environmental contamination fines as well. I know we've dealt with a few from our side as well, and we're seeing the exposures from that end as well, from the fines and penalties as well.
Sorry, Sipa, I just lost you there. No, just say again.
Okay. No, I was just touching on the point of compliance from across the borders, because we're seeing obviously with the trucks moving across, and then we're seeing some of the clients that might not have environmental liability policies being fined and carrying huge fines as well, penalties as well. So yeah, yes. But yeah, you can from your experience, tell us what we as well from your experience as to what you're seeing on the ground.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, we do have a lot of issues, and I know Willie is gonna touch more on that on his slides. So I'm going to leave it with him, with obviously putting out a couple of scenarios for you on his slides. Yeah. So he's going to touch more on that aspect. So if you look at the South Africa legislation, so in South Africa, we've got the National Road Traffic Act and the National Environmental Management Waste Act. There are two relevant laws. The National Road Traffic Act regulates the road traffic, including transportation of hazardous materials, sets standards for vehicle safety, driver licensing and roadworthiness, managing the waste generation, handling, storage, transportation and disposal of the hazardous waste. And it aims to minimize waste at adverse environment impacts when transporting hazardous material by road. Both laws apply. The compliances with National Road Traffic Act ensures that safety regulates waste management aspects. So that's just a brief, obviously, what South Africa do have in place with the National Road Traffic and the Waste Act to transport any hazardous waste on our roads. For Zambia and Botswana, relevant laws and regulations regarding transportation of hazardous materials and environmental management. In Zambia Environmental Management Act regulates the environmental impact assessment, pollution control and waste management. The Road Traffic Act governs road safety, including transportation of the hazardous goods. And then if you just want to go to the next one, same applies with the Namibia Act as well. That's similar to what we do have in South Africa. Just to go back to the fines that you can receive. So I've made some couple of notes. Obviously, in Namibia, you need to report spillages within 14 days. Your penalties can go up to about 500,000 Namibian dollars or imprisonment. And the same applies with the Botswana, that you need to report the spillages immediately, and penalties on a daily fines. Cleanup is your responsibility, or the transporter's responsibility. And that's obviously putting a lot of a responsibility back to the transporter to ensure that things are in place, and they do report it, and they do take responsibility of the cleanups to ensure that these things do happen, to avoid these hefty fines or imprisonment. And you also see that we've made just a bullet point on it damaged the operator or the transporter's reputation, as well as the insurance that, that's getting exposed to this if they don't take the responsibility.
Yes, can I jump in there quickly,
Yes.
Adrian? You just mentioned that imprisonment. Who would be going to jail here? Is it the directors? Because it just hit me now that there's an element of directors and officers' liabilities. So it's not only limited to the environmental space. So who would be going to prison here?
So yes,
the,
yeah. So
the transporter end.
so it's going to be like you mentioned, like your directors of the company that they need to take the responsibilities, and they will obviously be imprisonment of that, yes. But what they can also do is, what I've heard about these things before, is that they do keep the drivers responsible, because they are the guys that's vulnerable on the ground. And so they will keep them until your directors or your 16(2) of the companies will be taking responsibility of that, yes.
Okay, and I like the fact that you mentioned that, like in Botswana, you said it needs to be reported immediately, and then in Namibia, they're talking anytime between immediately and 14 days.
14
There's a
days.
huge part, yeah, from a full-blown environmental policy point of view or a general liability, because there's a huge differences. So it's very important for the clients to obviously get the appropriate cover, because the time is of essence when it comes to environmental liability incidences.
Correct, yeah. And then obviously you need to look at from the time when the incident happens and when it's been reported. So
Sure.
Obviously, if you do have a few things in place, in the sense of, all right, you've got a service provider available, their response time is of the essence to get to the scene as soon as possible. Like a company like ourselves, to get there, it all depends on the time frame. So if you report it after 10, 14 days of the incident, your cost will be significantly higher than what it was supposed to be when it was reported immediately. So that also do play a role of when the incident gets reported.
Yeah. All right. Now we can go on. So sorry that just thought that hit me. Yeah.
No, 100%. Yeah, so the next two slides is just the key regulator bodies, which I would like just to show everybody who they need to consider when do reporting. So there's just a couple of examples. In South Africa, you've got the DFFE, which is the Department of Forestry and Fishery and Environment, DOT, which is the Department of Transport, and the local municipalities and SAPs. And road enforcement. Zambia, you've got the ZIMA, Zambia Environmental Management Agency, and then the Road Transport and Safety Agency. Namibia, Ministry of Environmental Forestry and Tourism, Ministry of Works and Transport, and in Botswana, Department of Waste Management and Pollution Control, and Department of Road Transport and Safety. So all of these countries, they do have these departments that is there to assist the transporter at the end of the day, where you can report it. They've got these things in place. It's just a matter of familiarize yourself with them to ensure if you do have an incident, where to report it and to who to report it. To do your homework, especially when you do transports into these countries. Yes.
Oh, that's perfect. Thanks a lot, Adrian. Truly appreciate that. And if anybody has questions before we jump on to Vili's presentation, please continue to post them on the chat. We'll attend to them later. But thanks for this, for the insights from the legislation point of view. And I know most of these departments, correct me if I'm wrong, Adrian, but I know one of the very few efficient departments which are on the ball incidents when it happens. I know in South Africa, when the incident happens, they immediately there, and then they hold everybody accountable until the site is signed off. So I know from a South African perspective, and actually other countries as well, because it has to do with environment, and at the end of the day, it's all our livelihood.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. No, definitely. And yeah, especially by us, they do hold you accountable for the cleanup.
Yeah.
And you will have the support in the other countries as well to ensure that these things do happen. Yes.
which is important, leading us to Vili's presentation, to have all independent service providers from the cleanup point of view, as well as incident managers, so that they manage the entire process from the reporting point of view as well. But yeah, without jumping into Vili's presentation, I'll let
Yes.
him speak for himself. So yeah.
100%. Thanks a lot,
Thanks for the
Sipho, and thank you
insights.
for the opportunity.
No, it's only a pleasure. Yeah. Vili?
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, unfortunately, I cannot tell if everybody can hear you because on the presentation, but yeah, so far so good from my side. Yeah.
We can hear you.
Great.
Thanks, Vili.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm just going to kick off very quickly. Ultimately, what we are looking at today is the increase in transport specifically, but I don't want to just touch on transport. The scenarios that I'm going to discuss today is also going to show the insurance or the attendees to this iTuesday. The actual disasters and things that can happen when things really go wrong, and why it is so important to make sure that environmental cleanup costs and environmental liability is covered with a responsible and reputable insurance company. These are major environmental incidents and the legal frameworks around these 4 countries. Basically, it's Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, and I just included Kenya as well, just to spur away from the other 3 as well. But the analysis of transport, mining, and industrial accidents and the impacts that these incidents have on the environment, human health, and also the social economic way in which the countries operate in. So transport-related incidents in Botswana, I mean, this is not a new thing. It happens on a daily basis. There's incidents and accidents all over the country, specifically the corridors going up towards the Copperbelt. There's some serious chemicals, sulfur, sulfuric acid, and other hazardous chemicals that's being transported all the way up to the DRC in Zambia. And the loads are actually loaded from South Africa, and they do cross through various countries to get to their end destination. So just one scenario: a truck transporting a large quantity of agricultural chemicals overturns on a road close to a wetland in Botswana, and the accident resulted in a significant spill of pesticides and fertilizers into the surrounding soil, and also flowed into a nearby water source. So the impact of that incident on that water source, where there was some fish, you can see the dead fish and the discoloration of the water, basically renders this water source completely contaminated, and it will definitely harm anybody or any animal that would try and drink from it. And the costs and the damages. Now, the reality is that in South Africa, there's a lot of the dams next to the highways that actually belongs to farmers, and the farmers uses these dams to actually cultivate fish, tilapia, and so for sale into the food market. And if any of your chemicals or incidents would actually impact these dams, that becomes a liability. It becomes a claim against you, replacement, rehabilitation, cleanup of that dam, plus the replacement of all the fish that died, because there is loss of income. And so those claims are a reality. The environmental impacts, like I said, it's the soil and the water that was contaminated. Your environmental legislation that will apply. Botswana will have their legal or the legal routes that they go. These incidents must be reported. If we take it back to NEMA, which is the South African National Environmental Management Act, and that is actually the governing act on which all of the other supporting acts like your Waste Act, your Air Quality Act, and so has been written on. The countries or the countries in Africa has almost adapted that legislation as part of their, and they've named it now the Environmental Management Act of 2011 and so, but it's all been taken, or the way that they interpret it is the same way as what it is interpreted in South Africa in the National Environmental Management Act. So the incidents needs to be reported. You've got a notification of 24 hours. So once the incident happened, the person needs to report it within 24 hours to the authorities. The authorities then, if they've got capacity and capability to go to the scene, will go to the scene and go and look at that site. And they will also have inputs from their side on their expectations on that site. And they will then monitor the process flow. And that is what we do as EFI from our side, is to make sure that that legal obligation of the responsible person, the act refers to the responsible person, and that responsible person is defined to the person that was responsible for the incident. It could be the person that was in control of the products at the time of the incident. It's the person that owns the product that is on that vehicle, can also be held. So there can be a joint and several liability and responsibility that is carried by several people, and they will go up the food chain. Somebody owns the product, somebody wanted the product or sold the product, and there's a transporter in between that transports this. And insurance is defined in all three of those categories. They talk about the consignor, the consignee, and the transporter. And that needs to be managed through insurance, and the responsibilities must be tied up in a contract between these three parties. Okay, so the DA would likely take the lead in coordinating the cleanup processes, which will include assessments, containment, remediation, and then the monitoring of the site afterwards until it is returned to its natural state. So when it comes to cleanup and rehabilitation costs, ultimately, they want this site to basically be in the same condition, and that is what insurance also covers. This is that it doesn't have to be better, it just needs to be the same condition as what it was before the incident actually happened. The fines and costs is in each and every one of these acts and laws. It has been defined in South Africa. It is in South African rands, and they talk about your fines can be 5 million rand or 5 years imprisonment, and with repeat offenders and non-compliance, it goes up to a maximum of 10 years or 10 million rand fines, and they can actually impose both at the same time. So it could be a 5-year imprisonment for the responsible party with a 5 million rand fine. But when it comes to international, when it comes to the African countries, they have actually adapted the fines in dollars, and that is defined within their legislation. Namibia, here we had a train accident that was carrying industrial solvents. Also went into a river system. Ultimately, liquids will always follow the route of a rainstorm, and it will always end up in a river system, and Adrian will agree to that. Liquids always finds its way through the path of least resistance, and it will end up in some kind of water source or so. And the importance of that quick response is very important. Ultimately, that is where your containment comes in, where your control of the incident comes in. And it is very, very important to actually dispatch the correct service providers to the site. Now, I2 has got a panel of service providers, not just for South Africa, but also for Africa. That panel is basically managed by EFI Global, and audited and maintained. And when these incidents do happen, and the calls come through to us quickly, we are able to dispatch in a very short period of time and get the guys out to the sites. Ultimately, with these products leaking into the environment, there's not just surface water contamination that we're looking at. The bigger risk is really groundwater contamination, because once chemicals and contamination has reached groundwater, your rehabilitation and remediation costs actually goes up tenfold, because you can't dig it out. It's a process now where you've got to basically remove the contamination through mechanical processes of pumping groundwater out, putting chemicals into the ground to ground level. Groundwater can be as shallow as a meter below ground level, but it can be as deep as 30 or 40 or 50 meters below ground level. And you can't dig up that contamination, and you can't pump up the entire underground water table. So it is a very, very lengthy process, and the costs associated with dealing with groundwater contamination goes into millions and sometimes hundreds of millions of rands. And that is why the response to these incidents is crucial, because we need to limit and eliminate the possibility of chemicals reaching groundwater. We want to stop it on surface, we want to clean it up on surface, and we want to make sure that that doesn't get to the point where the site then gets registered as a remediation site. Again, MEF in Namibia, they will do the source control, so they will go to site, and we find it. They do go to site on these incidents. They're there within a day. Hydrological assessments, they insist on that. Geohydrology is a very, very important thing to keep in mind when there's chemical incidents, because if you've got sandy soil and you've got loam soil, your penetration on sand is going to be much higher, because sand per cubic meter can really maybe contain between 10 and 15 liters of a product. So if you've got 100 liters spill, you can times that by by that 10 or 15 liters, and you will see how many cubes of soil you can potentially contaminate with 100 liters of product, let's say diesel or sulfuric acid or so, because it hasn't got the ability to contain or to hold a liquid. It's a filtration medium, basically, and that will very, very easily cause chemicals to seep down to groundwater, and if the groundwater is impacted, ultimately your cost increases of that cleanup. Your loam soil has got the ability to hold a bit more, and you can maybe have that loam soil could potentially contain 100 liters or 120 liters of a product. However, it is still permeable, and it's not a binding agent, or so it's not a hard surface, so liquids will tend to seep away and move towards the groundwater very quickly. The other factors that also influences ultimately is weather conditions. When it rains and you've got a chemical incident, rain carries that contamination either to surface water, and it could also then assist it to actually become mobile and go down to groundwater. So all of these factors influences decision making and the responses to these types of incidents. And times of year, rain season against dry season, can actually dictate the cost associated with these types of cleanups. Again, we're talking about the fines. It's all written into the legislation. And the unfortunate thing is that when you calculate back from the dollars that is used, some of these fines actually costs more than what the cleanup costs.
Yeah, and that's why it's important to have the correct cover and reporting it immediately. I know we've been involved in a couple of matters where fines are like, exorbitant. So I agree with you there.
Absolutely. All right, let's go on. Right, here's another thing, Zambia. We know that those areas up there is very prone to the barges, carries people, products, vehicles, everything over huge river systems. And we had one that was transporting some drums of sulfuric acid. During the loading process, one of the drums got damaged. One of the containers, actually, it's a 1,000-liter bin that was damaged. And this sulfuric acid entered the water, and you can see the fauna and flora impact on that system. Although the sulfuric acid eventually dilutes, it's got a very, very severe impact on the environment the moment it hits the water, and this is the reality. So just that already, although this may not result in a major cleanup, because you can't take the sulfuric acid out of the water, and the water body will eventually neutralize and dissolve it. Your fauna and flora impact, as well as the liability risk that you have with somebody maybe using that water, drinking that water, coming in contact with that water in the process while it's neutralizing and being affected. Health or physical damages can be caused by the acid to skin and the body, or the intestines if they do take in that water. And children plays in this water. I mean, it's a reality. So
There could be class
again,
actions arising from this.
say again.
There could be class actions arising from this. So yeah,
Yes, absolutely, yes, and this ultimately can lead to serious reputational harm to companies, to the extent where the government, and we've had it in two of these countries, we've actually had governments refusing transporters to come into their country. And they've even implemented processes where products were involved in incidents where they will not allow that product to enter the country, be transported through the country and out the other side without an escort. And that escort is a significant amount of cost. Ultimately, it's traveling cost. It's the people that needs to be in that vehicle and the equipment that's in that vehicle that needs to escort this vehicle from point of entry into the country right through to the other side where it leaves the country, and that's what they've implemented. So now you've got to choose to either go the route of employing, every time your vehicle is standing at the border post, employing the escort, or rerouting past the country through another country, which could increase your route and your cost of transport. So there's financial decision making that needs to be done with these. Zambia, we've already discussed it. Zima has got that Environmental Management Act, number 12 of 2011 as well, and that will then be used. Yeah, we've got another one in Zambia, and this is where it really gets serious. The mining activities. Ultimately, mining is the main contributor to transport that increases into Africa. A lot of the chemicals gets transported specifically for the mining industry, and so. But mines have also got their own biggest problems, and in the last few years, and even just in the last year, we've had serious tailing dam failures, and not just in Africa, also in South Africa. We've had incidents where this has happened. These things deposits tailings water and slurries down the natural flow path downstream, and it's huge volumes. We're talking about 50,000 cubic meters, 80,000 cubic meters. So it's 80 million liters, 50 million liters of this product that breaks through the wall and flows downhill, and this causes severe flooding. It damages agricultural land. It creates, it harms ecosystems. It destroys infrastructures, flows through houses, damage and wash away bridges. And the contaminants that is found in this slimes dams ranges everything from your chemicals like your cyanides, your sulfides, your chlorides, and other minerals that get formed, to heavy metals. And heavy metals, we know, when that gets into water and into the body, accumulates in the body and will attack organs like your liver, your kidneys, and also affect your nervous system. So these are serious contaminants. Zima, again, also is involved with the management of these types of disasters, and the fines on these could be very, very high. With these dams, with the manufacturing of these dams, there's certain requirements that needs to be in place. Ultimately, your environmental impact assessments that has to be done, but you've also got dam failure analysis that needs to be done. So before this dam is actually constructed, there's an engineer that has to design the dam wall and make sure that it's not going to wash away. It's got certain capacities that it can carry. They can't exceed that. They need to make allowance for rainwater and everything. And with our adverse weather over the last 2 or 3, 4 years we had in South Africa and also into Africa, we've seen these failures. And the majority of these guys have failed to actually do a dam failure analysis before this incident has happened, which will guide them and tell them what's going to happen if that dam fails.
Yeah, and that talks to PI exposure as well. So there's a lot at play here because there's general liability exposure, PI exposure, now there's environmental liability exposure. So it's very crucial to have the right cover. That for sure, certain that we need to make sure that the right covers are sold to the client.
Absolutely. A dam in Kenya. Now this is just this is an industrial dam, so there's also some chemicals and contaminants that goes in there, and it's a evaporation dam, and they also extract again. So they do put it through a process, but the water goes back into the plant. Here the dam waters also failed, and you had a flooding downstream. You can see the houses of the people that's been flooded. The contaminated water that's basically filled the stream that runs past their house, and this area now is completely. So now this people needs to be relocated. They've got to be taken away over there. They can't use that water. They can't use that land. So whatever agriculture they practiced in that area can now not be done. The water can't be used from that little river stream that passed the dam to actually irrigate anything. So this little village, and the cost now of rehabilitating this is too high for the responsible party. He had insurance, but not nearly enough for what this actually created. So this is now a complete relocation. This is governments involved. There's fines over here, and there's imprisonment with this specific claim.
Yeah.
All right. They've also got the cleanup procedures, which is done by the National Environmental Management Agency. They also take control of the containment, remediation of the affected land, water treatment, and ecological restorations. What is important as well is to understand that some of these disasters, even the governments of the various countries don't have the funds to actually deal with these and to take charge of these types of rehabilitation. And so the best they can do is maybe relocate the people, but they will make sure that they are going to hold the people responsible that was involved with this and that created this. Nobody can do business at the expense of the environment, and that's very important. And that's why they will prosecute and lock you up if you don't have the correct funds available to deal with these incidents.
Yeah.
Okay. So many African countries have vast and often separately polluted, especially polluted areas. When the environment incident occurs in a remote location, the cost of mobilization. So here we're looking specifically at costs when it comes to responding to these types of incidents. So because of the industrial areas, a lot of service providers that can deal with these types of cleanups and emergency incidents is based in areas where there is other work. Nobody can run a business from a small farm holding somewhere in the Northern Cape where there's only one incident happening a year or maybe two. So they usually establish themselves in areas where there is industrial work to be done, and the emergency work is then additional work to the standard day-to-day operation. So transport costs can be significant, specifically for incidents that happens outside of big cities. So traveling distances can range anything from a few hundred to maybe even over 1,000 kilometers to travel. So that gives you a long travel distance, but it also gives you a long travel time. And what it then adds to this is the fact that you then have to accommodate the people that travels that distance. You can't just take anybody off the road to work on a hazardous material incident. You can put him in an overall, and you can put him in gumboots and gloves, and you can give him all the PPE he needs. But if he hasn't got the knowledge and the understanding of what he's working with, this guy is basically a risk to everybody, because his injury becomes an injury to everybody that is responsible for the incident. So the companies will take qualified and competent people, go out to the sites, and this people has to be accommodated. They will have to eat. They need to drink. And that would be for incidents that's over long distances. Ultimately, if it is a close-by incident and the guy travels from his office every day and the people sleep at home, that doesn't become an issue. Accommodation costs is for their own, and meal costs during the day would also be for themselves. Infrastructure limitations, ultimately, there is very few disposal facilities in the African countries where hazardous waste can be disposed of. And what you will see over here is that waste is either dealt with in the form of neutralizing it or treating it with other chemicals to make it less hazardous, or to make it completely inert. And what they also do with it is follow the process of the Basel Convention, where the waste actually gets exported out of that country through the SADC, and so back to South Africa, where this waste is then disposed of at a class 1 or hazardous disposal facility. Yeah, we can just imagine a chemical spill in a remote part of Namibia. Specialized cleanup teams and equipment might need to travel hundreds, even thousands of kilometers to get to even neighboring countries. Sometimes the closest service provider may not even be in the country of where the incident has happened. You may have to get a service provider from a cross-border country to actually respond to that incident, because he may be 500 kilometers closer than the other service providers. Cost of fines, like I said, usually in US dollars. Many African countries included provisions for fines and penalties within their environmental legislation, and they will issue these fines very easily. Why do they use the US dollar? It's basically that it is quite a stable currency. It's usually an international standard, so they can use international standards to fine people according to the script or the damages that they've caused. And then it also acts as a deterrent. So this will also be a deterrent effect. The higher fines and so will get these guys to rather implement proper procedures than just taking risks.
And I think it's appropriate for me to jump in there to mention that generally the environmental and liability policies do not cover fines and penalties. Hence, it's important to ensure that the appropriate cover is in place, and in time, whenever the incident happens, it's prevented, and then it's reported immediately, so it doesn't get to fines and penalty stage. So it's important to manage that by reporting, having the right cover, and reporting immediately.
Yeah, Sipa, yeah, that is true. The other thing is that ultimately environmental policies and liabilities and so on is also the responsibility of the transporter or the insured to manage that. Because if he doesn't conform to the law, if he doesn't do the correct thing, if he doesn't follow the right procedures, report the incident and so, he can be held responsible for the entire incident and for the costs on that. And so it is the person's responsibility to make sure that he understands what his requirements is and what the legal requirements is that he needs to follow in order to make sure that his policy responds to these claims. So stringent procedures, safe disposal of hazardous waste is generated from environmental incidents. So Adrian spoke about the Waste Act. All of these countries have got some kind of waste management system. South Africa's got a very stringent waste management plan. So yeah, what you need to do with the waste, ultimately, you've got a chemical, but the moment that chemical gets into soil, the characteristics changes. So you can have a liquid that changes to a slurry or a liquid that changes to a sludge. You've got some reactions that takes place between the soil and the product. You've got water that's been impacted, that gets pumped up. So you need to characterize the waste. You've got to package and label it. Make sure that it's in the correct packaging. The moment you put an acid into the wrong container, the acid will destroy the container and you will have a secondary spill. So you need to choose the correct packaging, and you've got to make sure that it is labeled so that the people that handles that product understands what is in there and what the risks are. The transportation, the registration of your vehicles, the correct vehicle to transport, correct securing of the load on the vehicle, and when this waste is being transported, that the correct insurance is in place for this vehicle when the waste is transported. Treatments that gets done on site, if it is necessary, that you also know what the risks and what the effects is going to be of that treatment and what is the byproducts that's going to form when you actually treat the waste. And then right at the end, that final disposal, either in the country of origin or following the Basel Convention for disposal. Okay.
Yeah.
So in African countries, things that really influences the costs is your distances that needs to be traveled, cross borders, the time that is spent at border posts to clear, and then also the infrastructure limitations, which will then result in permits under the Basel Convention to bring waste back to South Africa and actually dispose of that waste over here. Increased costs as long distance transportation adds significant to the overall cost of managing the environmental incident, including fuel, permit, security, and time involved. And then the logistical complexity, transboundary movement of hazardous waste involves navigation and regulations of multiple countries and obtaining necessary approval. So if anything needs to come back to South Africa from Zambia, you don't just talk between the governments of Zambia and South Africa, and Botswana will be involved in this whole negotiation. You've got to go and draft or get a permit from all of them, and you've got to take them your management plan and everything. So they want to see the file, they all have to sign. So somebody needs to travel to these three governments and get the signature from all of them. And the process can take up to 3 months.
Yeah.
So very important, environmental pollution cover is crucial for addressing the immediate environmental damage, complying with regulatory cleanup orders, and mitigating further financial losses associated with this incident. Environmental liability cover third party, that has got to do with the overall legal defense costs, settlements, and judgments arising from liability claims related to environmental damages caused to others. And then why these covers are vital in the African context. It is there to cover the high cleanup costs. It is higher than in South Africa because of the obvious reasons that was mentioned. Potential for significant fines. Ultimately, these fines aren't covered, but we would rather spend the money there and prevent the fines because it will become the responsible party's responsibility to pay those fines. Liability risks, ultimately incidents could have an impact on a natural water source or a livelihood or impact somebody's livestock, and that all needs to be covered. And then compliance and sustainability. Compliance with the legislation of each country and sustainability of the company to exist going forward and to operate as a business.
Yeah.
So in conclusion, we've got our environmental incidents, particularly those involving hazardous, can become severe and long-lasting impacts in any region. Each country has environmental legislation in place and address pollution and ensure accountability. The effectiveness of implementing the vary due to factors such as resource constraints and enforcement capacity. The authorities in each country have procedures for assessing damages, overseeing cleanup efforts, and levying fines and those costs. Now, the big thing here, they've got that polluter pays principle in each of the acts. The key thing here is that, again, like I said, is that countries may refuse transporters to enter until they have fulfilled their obligation in that country. They will also seize assets and hold back assets like the vehicle, the driver, until the company has actually fulfilled their responsibility. So there will be robust enforcement and continued improvement of environmental regulations right through. And then the proper environmental pollution and liability cover is very important for transporters, industry, and mining houses when these incidents and disasters happen. As all African countries will insist that the cleanup and rehabilitation of the spill is done and that the polluter pays for the damages and to the third parties. So
That's very insightful, Willie. And yeah, we truly appreciate it. I think we right on time because we actually have left with 3 minutes, but it's very insightful from both from Adrian and yourself in terms of the insight you've shared in terms of what could happen, what legislation requires of the transporters, the people involved, and just, yeah.
right.
The one thing, yeah, I'm not sure if we have any questions, but the comment from my side, I know with, I'm gonna stop sharing, and yeah, I'm not sure if we have any questions. But one thing I made a note of as you were talking of infrastructure is that it is important. It's typical risk management. It is important for transporters to plan their routes in terms of where they're going, if the road is appropriate for whatever the product they're carrying in order to prevent accidents and yeah, just I'm not sure if you have any comment to that in terms of, because it basically, I remember about a couple of years ago we had that big explosion in Boksburg. I know an allegation was made of the wrong route and stuff like that, but yeah, it's for me, I know it's important to plan your route, especially for transporters.
Yes, that is actually a requirement by law. The National Road Traffic Act actually states that the transportation of hazardous materials, that the companies must do route risk assessments. They've actually got obligation, according to the law, to actually inform disaster management centers through which they are transporting those hazardous materials. They must actually make their contact details and emergency procedures available to disaster management entities. So if you're going to transport through Ekurhuleni, or you're going to transport through Johannesburg or Tshwane, you've got to inform that disaster management that you are transporting. You've got to also tell them what routes along the N1, the N3, the N12 you're going to be transporting that waste or that product. So yes, it is actually a legal requirement. I think executing it has become a bit of a problem. I know that, for instance, companies did that to Parys in the Free State, where they send the fire department a notification that they will be transporting a specific chemical, and Parys Emergency Services wrote back and said to them, find another route, you're not driving through my town. So that's the reality of it. Some guys will run away, others will actually join and assist and take note of the information you send them.
Okay. Thanks for that. Just quickly going through the questions here. I can see thanks, Ernest. I'll send you the contact details, and then Kieran Felth, which jurisdiction will a third party who has suffered damages be able to bring their action to, assuming the event occurs outside of South Africa? In short,
sorry about the echo, everyone. Okay, so I see there is a question in the chat, and this comes from Nolene of Garin Group. And the question is, does the regulations with respect to the responsible person also apply to municipalities causing pollution events? And the answer to that is yes. The common bylaws do make provision to hold responsible persons liable. In fact, there's a very interesting case, and this is the case of the Mafube municipality. And basically, top officials were held liable. There was an order that they needed to finalize and implement a financial recovery plan without delay. And also, these officials had to report to the court under oath within 60 days on the measures that they've actually implemented to prevent spillage of sewage.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Nance. And I'm not sure. I think that's about it in terms of question and answers. And I think it's spot on because we are running over time, 11:01. But should anyone have any questions, comments, post the presentation in the chat, please reach out to me from the presentation point of view. From the product in terms of underwriting, please reach out to our underwriting team through Shelley and product head. And we've got a bigger team from the underwriting side. And please also reach out to any I2 contacts. Any other topics you may wish us to cover from the claims point of view, please reach out to Nadia. And yeah, that's about it. And everybody should enjoy Africa Day on Sunday. We'll see you soon in terms of another topic, interesting and very relevant topic next week, Tuesday, from a cyber perspective across the continent. Otherwise, thanks everyone. Have a good day. And yeah, thanks, Willie. Thanks, Adrian. Truly appreciate your time. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you
Thank you,
very much,
Sipa.
everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thanks everyone
Yeah.
for your comments. Chat.
Bye.
Bye.